Hi, my name is Alex Grant, and I'm here to share with you another episode of Mic Drop. Today, I want to talk to you about what it's like for me as a black man here in Costa Rica. Here in Costa Rica, we are in the equivalent of the Black History Month celebration, but for our country here in Central America. We also celebrate on the upcoming August 31st, the day of Afro-Costa Rican culture. So it's a very important holiday, and it's actually the first time that it's been validated by our government as a national holiday and an official holiday, similar to what took place in the United States with the celebration this year of Juneteenth becoming a national acknowledged holiday. So it's a time for celebration for us. And I want to share a little bit about my experience as a person of African descent here in Costa Rica. I am part of the global African diaspora, and I want to share a little bit of my experience. I grew up on the coast of our country in a province called Limon. It's on the Caribbean side of our country. My dad is from that region, and my mom is from that very same region on the opposite side of the border, on the side of Panama, in an area called Bocas del Toro. So I am half Costa Rican, half Panamanian by origin, and I was born and raised here in Costa Rica, and also was in my early years, grew up on the Caribbean side where my dad is from. I grew up with my grandparents there. And I had the wonderful experience of growing on the Caribbean side of my country, growing up there and being exposed to our culture and our traditions. People of African descent in Costa Rica on the Caribbean side come actually from the West Indies, come from the islands in the Caribbean, and our ancestors came to Costa Rica as free people to work in the building of the railroad. And on the heels of the building of the railroad then came the establishment or the arrival of a transnational company, very well known, the United Fruit Company. So the people of African descent have been an intricate part in the development, the economic and social development of our Caribbean coast and region here in Costa Rica. They live in the most important port of exportation in our country. Yet, moving forward in my story, I then moved to the city for my junior high and high school years. And then in the city, I became a more evident minority, being with people of Spanish or white descent. And it was important for me to have a very clear sense of who I was, because living in the city, I became an outsider. I became a different person. I became the black kid in the classroom, the black kid in the neighborhood. And just like my grandparents and parents taught me, anything I did, whether it was good or bad, was always going to inevitably stand out and would be singled out. So being a person of African descent here in Costa Rica means that sometimes you are the object of jokes, of being yelled out things on the street by people as they're driving by. They might call you the name of a sports figure, of a singer, of a celebrity of some sort, but they might also call you silly names. They might make you the pond of jokes. And I think in our ignorance, because it is very difficult to value someone or to appreciate someone that you do not know, I think the curiosity about our skin color, our hair, our culture makes it always easy for kids and adults to make jokes or to make silly or smart remarks about the other, the one who is different. And it's so interesting that as we look in the news today, even globally, how much there's still left so much work to be done for us to be able to understand and live with each other, for us to be able to listen and to appreciate each other for who we are, and to not make assumptions, whether they're positive or negative assumptions about us, stereotypes. Just like the assumption that because you're black, you must be good and interested in sports, you must like a certain kind of music or certain kind of food, or you're probably related to every other black person that they know, or you know every other black person that lives in the country. A lot of these silly generalizations and assumptions are very, very common, a very common part of my experience as a person of African descent in this country. Sometimes there are also some negative assumptions. The assumptions that you might be lazy, that you might be stupid, that you might not be someone who is focused or who has any perspectives or aspirations towards the future, or that you might be dangerous because the assumption is that you must be a hoodlum, that you might just be a thug, that you might be into drugs or something of that nature. So I'm sure that for people who live in Europe or in the United States, I'm not saying anything unusual or anything terribly different from what you might have also heard from other men and women of African descent around the world. And I think that because Costa Rica is such a unique country in the world, being a country without an army, sometimes there's the assumption that because we do not have an army, that we live peacefully. And there's a very limited understanding about what peace really entails. The fact that there isn't an armed conflict happening here does not mean that we're free of conflict. People die every day here because of how people drive, or because people abuse substances or drink a lot. There's teenage pregnancy, the high rates or statistics in that regard. So there are a number of different social issues that we face that clearly reflect the fact that we do not live at peace necessarily, and that there are many, many ways in which we live violence within families that don't necessarily entail an armed or a conflict or a weapon being involved. There are many ways in which we can harm each other that don't necessarily deny the fact that we do live in conflict on a daily basis here. So there are a lot of important things that people of African descent have contributed historically to this country. And sometimes we've been made invisible. Sometimes we've been made invisible in the way that we're not talked about. Rectify this error, but we know that if we are invisible in history, then we're also invisible in decision-making processes, in politics, and in positions of power, because we're made to feel or we're not we go without being acknowledged as important figures in our history. We have one of our national heroes, whose name is Juan Santamaria. His name is the name of our international airport, and yet most the average Costa Rican does not know that this historical figure, who was part of a civil war or a civil battle in our country. We also may also sometimes experience being taken to the opposite extreme, which is where there's a certain tokenism where sometimes people are invited to be part of strategically, even in our government. We have the first African with the need to continue to have a dialogue around race relations and about the invisibility that people of African descent experience around the globe, we realize that there's been some important achievements, but there's still a lot of work pending to be done. And I think that this celebration of Black History Month here in Costa Rica is a wonderful opportunity of people of